The phone rang at exactly 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday. I was sitting at my kitchen island, nursing a cup of black coffee and reviewing my monthly budget. I'm Donna, 65 years old, a widow for 5 years, and a retired bookkeeper. I've always liked numbers. They don't lie, and they certainly don't hide things from you. When my daughter Rachel's name flashed on the screen, I answered right away. I expected her to ask if I could watch my 2 grandchildren this weekend. Instead, her voice sounded tight, rushed, and deliberately casual. "Hey, Mom. Just calling to let you know we moved to Colorado yesterday. We're on the road now. Forgot to tell you." The kitchen went dead silent. I stared at the ceramic mug in my hand. Colorado. That was 1,200 miles away. She was moving my grandchildren across the country, and she was dropping it into conversation like she had forgotten to buy milk. "You moved states?" I asked, keeping my voice entirely level. "Yeah, Greg's parents found us a rental near them. It all happened so fast, Mom. You know how crazy packing is. We just forgot to call. Nobody forgets to tell their mother they are moving out of state. You hide it because you don't want the conversation, or because you simply don't care." I heard her husband Greg in the background telling her to wrap it up so they could get food. I took a slow breath. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just saw the situation for exactly what it was. "I see," I replied softly. "Well, good luck, honey." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for her to say goodbye. I set the device face down on the granite counter. Then I opened my laptop. If she was independent enough to move across the country without telling me she was independent enough to pay for her own life, I spent 35 years keeping books for a mid-sized logistics firm. I know how to track every dime. For the last 3 years, I had been the silent safety net for Rachel and Greg. I didn't do it for them. I did it to make sure my grandchildren had a stable life. I opened my primary banking portal. First on the chopping block was the shared credit card. I had added Rachel as an authorized user when her first child was born, purely for groceries and emergencies. Over the last year, those emergencies had morphed into restaurant dinners, Greg's golf fees, and premium gas for Greg's truck. Last month alone, she put $800 on my account. I clicked the Settings tab, found her name, and selected Remove Authorized User. A green checkmark confirmed the action. Done. Next was the family cell phone plan. I had kept Rachel and Greg on my unlimited plan and save them some money while they saved for a house. Clearly, they had saved enough to move to Colorado. I logged into my mobile carrier's website. With 3 clicks, I suspended both of their lines. The billing cycle ended in 2 days. After that, their phones would be disconnected entirely. Just as I closed the browser, my front door unlocked. It was my son, Brian. He's 2 years older than Rachel, a pragmatic man who works as a high school science teacher. He walked into the kitchen, took one look at my face, and stopped. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Your sister moved to Colorado yesterday," I said, taking a sip of my cooling coffee. "She just called to tell me. She forgot to mention it." Brian frowned, pulling out a stool. "She what? Are you kidding me?" "No," I replied. But I just remembered to update my finances. After Brian left, I walked down the hallway to the guest room. I called it the kids' room because I kept it stocked for my grandchildren. Toys, a small crib, a toddler bed, and an entire wardrobe of clothes I had bought for them. I pushed the door open and stopped in my tracks. The toy chest was half empty. The good winter coats I had bought them last month were gone. The expensive baby monitor was missing from the nightstand. I realized then that Rachel had been methodically packing this room up over her last few Sunday visits. She would come over, let the kids play, and quietly sneak my belongings into her trunk. It was calculated. She knew she was leaving for a long time, and she used my home like a free retail store before skipping town. I felt a brief flash of heat in my chest. Not sadness, disgust. I didn't sit on the bed and weep over the missing toys. Instead, I walked to the garage and grabbed a stack of heavy-duty trash bags. I went back into the room and began clearing it out. I stripped the beds, folded the remaining cheap toys into a donation box, and took down the cartoon curtains. If they were gone, this space belonged to me again. I had wanted a sewing and reading room for 5 years, but I kept this space for a daughter who couldn't even look me in the eye to say goodbye. By sunset, the room was completely bare. The physical exertion felt good. It cleared my mind. Just as I was tying off the last donation bag, my iPad chimed from the kitchen. I walked out and looked at the screen. It was a fraud alert from my bank. Declined transaction, $145 at a gas station in Amarillo, Texas. I smiled, turned off the screen, and went to make dinner. The phone call came at 7:30 p.m. It was Rachel. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Mom, did you do something to the credit card?" Her voice was panicked, laced with annoyance. "We're at a gas station in Texas, and it keeps declining." Greg is furious. "I didn't do anything to it," I answered calmly, wiping down my countertops. "I simply removed you as an authorized user." "You what? Why we need to fill up the truck?" "You moved to another state." "Rachel, you didn't consult me, you didn't tell me, and you took items from my house without asking." Adults who relocate across the country manage their own gas money. I heard shuffling on the line, and then Greg's voice boomed through the speaker. "Donna, are you seriously doing this right now? We have your grandkids in the car." He always used the kids as a shield. It was his favorite tactic to get me to open my wallet. "Greg," I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat, "you are a 32-year-old man. If you packed your family into a car to drive 1,200 miles without enough money in your own bank account to buy gas, that is a failure on your part, not mine. We're on a tight budget because of the move you're supposed to help," he snapped. I was happy to help when we were a family that communicated. Now you are independent. Best of luck on the road. Don't you hang up on me. I tapped the red button. The house was wonderfully quiet. I turned on some soft jazz, poured myself a glass of red wine, and sat on my porch. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about their problems. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly light. I made a list of every loose end connecting me to my daughter's household. There was one big item left: the car insurance. 3 years ago, I gave them my old Honda CR-V when I bought a new sedan. I signed the title over to Rachel, but because Greg had terrible credit and a spotty driving record, I kept the vehicle on my insurance policy to keep their rates manageable. I was paying $200 a month just to insure a car that was currently speeding toward the Rocky Mountains. I called my insurance agent at 9 a.m. Sharp. "Hi, Sarah. It's Donna. I need to drop a vehicle from my policy today." The Honda. By 9:15 a.m., the car was officially uninsured under my name. I sent Rachel a brief text message. "The insurance on the Honda has been canceled as of this morning. You will need to secure your own policy immediately." I knew she wouldn't see it right away. True to my timing, the mobile carrier had cut their service at midnight. Unless they found a roadside diner with free Wi-Fi, their phones were currently expensive paperweights. The silence from their end was golden. I spent the afternoon at the garden center buying soil and new pots for my back patio. I had always rushed through my weekends constantly on call for Rachel's emergencies. Now I took my time. I spoke to the nursery owner, drank a lemonade in the sun, and realized just how much energy I had been bleeding into a one-sided relationship. When I got home, Brian was waiting in my driveway. He was holding a large metal toolbox. "What's that for?" I asked. "I'm changing your locks," Brian said, walking toward the front door. "Rachel still has a key. And knowing her and Greg, they'll expect to walk back in here whenever things get tough." I nodded. You're a good son, Brian. With the new deadbolts installed, I turned my attention to the garage. Greg had been using my two-car garage as his personal storage unit for 2 years. Half of the space was piled high with his heavy power tools, old tires, a broken weight bench, and boxes of seasonal decorations Rachel didn't want cluttering her apartment. I had asked them 5 times to move it. They always had an excuse. I am not a free storage facility. I took photos of the weight bench, the tools, and the tires. I created an account on a local community app and posted them under a simple heading, Moving Sale. Everything must go today. Cash only. I priced everything to sell immediately. $10 for the weight bench, $50 for the whole box of tools. Within an hour, my driveway was a busy marketplace. A young couple bought the tools. A college student took the bench. By 3 o'clock, half of Greg's junk was gone, and I had $150 in my pocket. The rest of the useless items, broken lamps, old clothes, empty boxes, I dragged out to the curb. I scheduled a bulk trash pickup with the city for Monday morning. I swept the garage floor. I parked my car inside with plenty of room to spare. I looked at the clean concrete and breathed in the smell of dust and motor oil. It felt like I was reclaiming my territory, square foot by square foot. They had taken my generosity for granted, treating my home like an extension of their own property. They wanted to pack up in the dead of night and leave fine. But they were leaving everything behind, including the privileges of being my family. It was Sunday afternoon when Rachel finally found a way to reach me. The caller ID showed a strange Colorado number. It was Greg's mother, Susan. I answered. Mom, it's me. Rachel's voice came through thick with anger and tears. She was using her mother-in-law's phone via Wi-Fi. What is wrong with you? Our phones just died. We had to buy prepaid cards just to navigate. And you cut the insurance. If we get pulled over, we're ruined. You should have thought about logistics before you moved, I said, organizing my spice rack. You're punishing your own grandchildren, she yelled. We're sleeping in Greg's parents' basement. It's freezing. We don't have any money for groceries because you cut the card. Rachel? I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. Do not play the victim. You planned this move for weeks. You stole items from my guest room. You let your husband disrespect me. You didn't even have the decency to say goodbye. You treated me like an ATM that you unplugged when you were done with it. That's not fair. Greg's parents promised us a free place to stay. We had to take the chance. Then Greg's parents can buy your groceries, I replied. You chose them. You chose this. I am simply respecting your independence. If you don't turn the phones back on, you will never see your grandchildren again, she threatened. The ultimate trump card. I paused, holding a jar of cinnamon. I loved those kids, but I knew the game. If I caved to emotional blackmail now, I would be paying for it until I died. That is your choice as a mother, I said calmly. But I will not be extorted. Goodbye, Rachel. I hung up and blocked Susan's number. 2 weeks passed without a word. My life settled into a beautiful, quiet routine. I went to water aerobics. I had dinners with Brian and his wife. I finished 3 books. My bank account, usually drained by Rachel's minor emergencies, was flourishing. Then, on a Tuesday, Brian came over for coffee. He looked at me across the kitchen island, shaking his head. You're not going to believe this, Brian said. Rachel just called me crying. Oh, did Greg's parents' basement flood? I asked dryly. Worse. Greg's parents lied to them. They told Greg they could live there for free, but yesterday Susan demanded $1,000 for rent and utilities. Greg doesn't have a job lined up yet. Rachel is panicking. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I see. She asked me to ask you for a loan, Brian said, looking mildly disgusted. Just $2,000 to get them into their own apartment. She said she's too scared to call you directly. Tell her my bank is closed, I stated. That afternoon, I looked at my savings. Without Rachel's daily drains, I had a surplus. Instead of transferring a bailout to a daughter who only valued my wallet, I logged onto a travel website. I booked a 10-day guided tour of the Grand Canyon in Sedona. First-class flights, nice hotels. I paid for it in full. I had spent my entire retirement serving others. It was time I saw the desert. When Brian texted Rachel my response, "Mom says her bank is closed," she didn't reply. I knew exactly what was happening in that cramped Colorado basement. Reality was setting in. 6 weeks later, I was packing my suitcase for Arizona. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any packages. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch, looking exhausted and disheveled, were Rachel and Greg. The kids were sitting on the steps, looking tired. They had driven all the way back. I unlocked the wooden door, but kept the heavy security screen door firmly shut and locked. I pushed open the glass pane to speak to them. "Hello," I said. Rachel looked stunned to see a locked screen between us. She rattled the handle. "Mom let us in. We're exhausted. We drove for 2 days straight." "Why are you here, Rachel? Colorado didn't work out. Greg got into a huge fight with his dad. They kicked us out. We need to stay here for a few weeks until we figure things out." "My key isn't working." "I changed the locks," I said flatly. Greg stepped up, looking furious. "Donna, open the door. We live here for now, and I need to get into the garage to get my tools to find some side work." "Your tools are gone, Greg," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I sold them a month ago, along with the weights and the junk you left on my property." His jaw dropped. "You sold my property. You abandoned your property when you fled the state without notice," I corrected him. "And no, you don't live here. This is my home." Rachel burst into tears. "Mom, please. We have nothing. The kids are tired. Where are we supposed to go? You are adults. You will figure it out." They stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, trying every tactic. Greg yelled. Rachel cried. They tried to push the kids forward to guilt me. I simply stood my ground, my hands resting calmly on the inside handle of the security door. "You can take them to a motel," I said. "There's a budget inn off the highway. Tomorrow, if you are calm, you can bring the kids to a park and I will buy them lunch. But neither of you are sleeping under this roof tonight, or any night." Rachel stared at me. For the first time in her life, she realized I wasn't bending. The safety net had been permanently removed. She looked at Greg, defeated. "Come on," she whispered to him. "She's not going to let us in." Greg glared at me, muttering under his breath, but he turned around. They gathered the kids and walked slowly back to their car. I watched their taillights fade down the street. I didn't feel guilty. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The next day, I met them at a local park. I bought my grandchildren sandwiches and played with them on the swings. I treated Rachel and Greg like distant acquaintances. I didn't offer a dime for their motel room. I didn't offer a timeline for when they would be forgiven. A week later, Brian told me they had rented a tiny rundown apartment on the edge of town, and Greg was forced to take a minimum wage job at a hardware store just to make rent. Rachel had to pick up night shifts at a diner. They were finally learning how the real world worked. As for me, I flew out to Arizona. I stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon, feeling the warm wind against my face, entirely at peace. I was a mother, a grandmother, and a widow. But most importantly, I was finally my own priority. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for your adult children is to stop softening the blow of their own choices. We often confuse unconditional love with endless financial and emotional sacrifice. But true love has to include respect. And respect requires boundaries. Stepping back isn't about getting revenge or punishing anyone. It's about protecting your peace and giving them the space they need to finally grow up. You are never wrong for refusing to be a safety net for disrespect, and choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you healthy. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make the difficult choice to set strict boundaries with family, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more real, raw stories about life, navigating tough relationships, and taking back your peace. It really helps the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next video.